This is the Marketing Boss Podcast, where today's top marketing professionals reveal their best tips, tools, and strategies, and we all become better leaders because of it. And here's your host, video marketing expert, Parshell Houghton.
Hey, you guys, welcome back to another episode of the Marketing Boss Podcast. I'm Parshell Houghton. Thank you for being here with me today. You know, I'm excited today about our guest. His name is Joseph Cole. He's with a company called TapInfluence, and you guys are going to learn a lot, as I am going today, about influencer marketing. In particular, we're going to be talking about demystifying influencer marketing. For some time, you know, I've heard of the term, but it's still something that is new to me, and so I'm excited to speak with Joseph today and to get some insight there. To give you guys a bit of background about Joseph, he is a hands-on marketing leader. He has 10 plus years of experience in driving marketing results for B2B and B2C organizations. He's a strategist, and he is the executioner of customer acquisition. Oh my God, I can't talk today. Customer acquisition and retention programs. He has a really great in-depth experience in campaign design, analytics, creative development, branding, and user experience. So welcome to the Marketing Boss Podcast, Joseph. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, of course. Thank you for the nice shout out.
Absolutely. So before we jump into the episode, you guys, I definitely want to thank those who've connected with me so far on social media. And if you like to connect, you can find me, Parshell Houghton, on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Also, be sure to join our private LinkedIn group called the Marketing Boss Club. That's where marketing professionals like you and me can collaborate and grow together. Again, go to LinkedIn, check out the Marketing Boss Club, and come on in and join the group. All right, so with all that said, you guys, let's jump into this awesome discussion with Joseph. So, Joseph, could you please, we could just start off, just introduce yourself in terms of your background. How did you get started in marketing?
Yeah, it's funny. I actually started in acting. It sounds kind of odd in that. Really? Yeah, it sounds odd, but I think there's a lot of similarities between acting and theater arts and marketing. And I think the similarities lie in acting. You're always understanding the character, understanding why people take certain actions, and really becoming that person. And I think that translates nicely into marketing, in that any good marketing starts with understanding the who, and in a way that's the character, right? And marketing it's your persona. So with that same thread, I started my marketing career actually as an intern at Paramount Pictures in Los Angeles it was in their creative marketing department. From there, I moved into the agency world, and then naturally over to the startup world, where I'm currently at a company called TapInfluence.
Awesome. Now, tell us about TapInfluence. I'm assuming the name influence has something to do with influencer marketing, but tell us a little bit about the company as well.
Yeah, so I started here at TapInfluence. I think I've been actually at TapInfluence for about 8 months now. So I'm relatively new, but in the startup world, it feels like I guess a month is a year in a way. So it feels like a long time. Definitely a good time though. You know, you have accelerated learning, in my opinion, as well as being able to get your feet wet in different areas of marketing, hence my dive into influencer marketing. So TapInfluence is an influencer marketing SaaS company, so software as a service. We are a combination of a technology where we help automate and facilitate influencer marketing programs with brands. And so basically what it does is it identifies influencers and matches them with brands, vice versa, and facilitates the execution of those influencer marketing programs. So that's one part of the business. And the second part is, it's obviously the same business as the marketplace of influencers. So similar to, say, Uber, or I'm trying to think of another marketplace. I can't think of Uber, Lyft, Airbnb. It's a double-sided marketplace in that we have marketers and influencers, and so we have around, I think, 60,000 opt-in influencers who actually want to work with brands. So I think that's part of the differentiator with our solution compared to others, in that we have a pool of highly motivated influencers who want to work with brands.
That's really interesting. So you're on both sides there. You are helping the clients or the companies, and then the actual influencers, like you're bringing them together.
Exactly. It's I guess a way that you could describe it is it's a kind of an economy, or what we like to call the influence economy, and that's fed through brands and influencers and consumers, and so it creates this virtuous cycle, which is pretty similar to those different models that I mentioned before around Airbnb and Uber, and that we facilitate that relationship and help drive influence marketing campaigns through that.
Okay, so interesting. So with someone who's new to this concept, how would you define influencer marketing?
I think the best way actually is probably giving an example of where I've experienced influence marketing without realizing it. But it really does go back to the fundamental word of mouth. And when you think about the last purchase you made, in many ways it was, at least in my opinion, or in my experience, I should say, has been through a recommendation where someone has influenced me to make a purchase decision. And so influencers have become influential because of the content that they create. And so people look to them for recommendations on whether it be a product or service. And then, they typically make a purchase based on that recommendation or that influence. And I think one of the easiest examples is in the process of buying a car, where I did my research, and there were a few different people that I looked into and got an analysis, I guess, of what their perspective was on a certain type of car. And so I based my purchase decision of being somewhat influenced by that influencer.
Okay. That totally makes sense. So with because that's a great example as well, something, in terms of purchasing a car. Can you give us another example with, I don't know if you're allowed to make mention of these things or not, but an example of how you paired the influencer with a brand and the success that's come from that? I usually kind of see that as, let's say Nike gets with LeBron or something like that's, in my mind, like that's kind of how I see it,
Yeah, and actually one thing that you did bring up there, LeBron, is that with influence marketing, I think it really is important to understand what is an influencer. And so there's this model that we developed at TapInfluence, and it's called a pyramid of influence. And within that pyramid, at the top you have celebrities, like LeBron, for example, or Kim Kardashian. And people often confuse celebrities for influencers. Sure, they might have influence, but then they aren't necessarily influencers. And the reason for that, and I like say maybe Kim Kardashian will be the easiest example. If you recall if you recall her, I don't know, her episode back in Paris. I mean, I don't watch the show, but I know she was held hostage in her Paris apartment. And the thing there is that she becomes a story, and the content that she might be trying to influence becomes somewhat secondary. And the difference there is with an influencer, they are influential because of the content rather than the celebrity itself.
Gotcha.
And so, for example, you might take LeBron, for example, and he might be, I guess, take a sponsored opportunity for a different, like I'll use the car example, say Mazda or Mitsubishi or Toyota, right? And he might be driving that car and people are like, wow, I want to drive that Toyota. But the challenge there is that, do you really think LeBron will be driving a car that most everyday people drive? Probably not. So there's a level of authenticity that influencers bring that celebrities can bring. Obviously, celebrities have influence, but it isn't necessarily legit, right? Like, do you really think LeBron will be driving the car that you and I drive, for example? So I guess going back to that whole pyramid of influence, you've got the celebrities at the top. So, for example, again, Kim Kardashian or LeBron. And then you have at the bottom of that pyramid, you might have ambassadors or advocates. And the same thing with ambassadors and advocates. They aren't influencers because they don't necessarily have influence. They might provide influence by virtue of ratings or reviews, but they're not known for their content. And so the middle of the triangle or the pyramid of influence is the whole power middle, and that's where you have influencers, and you might have folks like social celebrity influencers to micro influencers. And the thing there is that they, again, are known for the content they create, and they become influential because of that. And that's really what defines an influencer, is that they have an authentic, meaningful relationship with followers because of the content that they create. And now I kind of went on a long tangent, but the rest of the question was related to... Sorry, Parshall.
Oh, no, gosh, I'm trying to remember myself, because I've been taking notes. This is really interesting. So, I mean, let's just jump to another direction here. So,
sure, no worries.
When it comes to, like, when you mentioned this pyramid, and
yep,
and for what's defined to be a good influencer, what other criteria do you guys usually look for that defines an influencer? I mean, besides the fact that they have content, they have a follow. Like, are there any other specific things that you look for?
Well, I think it does depend, as in anything in marketing. And so with an influencer, if you're to define an influencer, they're known for the content that they create. There's a high level of engagement with their audience, and that people follow them, people retweet them, people like their posts on Instagram, they follow them. So I would say in terms of loose criteria, anyone can have influence, but influencers typically have a sizable following with a high level of engagement. But you might also have micro-influencers who might not have the biggest audience. They might have around 10,000 followers in aggregate, but they are the recommendations or the influence that they have is actually very, very high. So it's really about the level of engagement that influencer has with their audiences.
Okay, that's just so intriguing. Now tell me as well, like, what is your process with then connecting the influencer to a brand?
There you go. That was a question that I was missing.
Okay. I knew I was going to come back to it somewhere.
Yeah. So the process of connecting an influencer with the brand. So it's really around one thing you have to be cautious of is that people can often become awestruck by an influencer's following and the sheer size of it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that influencer is good for your brand. And so the process that we go through, which is somewhat automated within our platform, where you can search for influencers based on specific criteria, is that you go through an analysis of identifying and looking at the influencer based on is their audience right for your brand? And so I think if you go through a manual process, it's like anything from a creative standpoint of marketing, you do somewhat of a creative brief where you try to understand first what is the problem you're trying to solve. What are the key messages that you need to share to understanding the persona and understanding your end user. And then going through that process and matching and understanding, when you look at the influencer, does that audience or the influencer's audience represent or is similar to your brand's audience? So that's typically the first part of that is the influencer identification. and that's about making sure that the audience, the influencer's audience, marries in a way, or mirrors, I should say, your brand's audience.
Okay.
And again, and what I was going to say here is that within our product, within TapInfluence, it's somewhat of a streamlined process in that we help marketers and we facilitate that through our technology of identifying influencers and their respective audience based on criteria that the brand needs to, run their specific marketing campaign.
Gotcha. And so then after that connection has been essentially identified, do you guys also help with the initial communication? Or is it that the client who's using your software then has the ability to reach out? You guys help them to know what to say? Because in that regard, different questions come in my mind related to, is the influencer looking to be incentivized in some way, or do they see this connection as a means to continue to provide more value to their audience and their followers, which in turn, provides value to them too. So, how does that happen? Like, how do you advise that someone would then reach out to this an influencer, and then what is the influencer looking for in return, if anything?
Yeah, so that's a really good question and interesting one, actually, because we ran a survey where we polled around 200,000 influencers to get their opinion on how to work with brands and how to build a better, stronger relationship. Because at the end of the day, if you're going to run a successful influencer marketing program, you really need to embrace the relationship with the influencer. Because they're great at content creation and they've got these huge audiences that brands want to tap into. Now, the process beyond the influencer identification, you can do it two ways. If you go with a solution like TapInfluence, it's all managed within our software. And so it's almost like a dating app in a way, in that you are looking for the right influencers and the influencers are looking for the right brands, and that the relationship is mutually beneficial for both ends. So I think it answers the question of what you're asking there around, how do you ensure there's value? And I think the value needs to be reciprocated, in that in order for it to be effective, you need to have the right brand and the right influencer work together. So within our platform and TapInfluence, that relationship is basically created in our software. And then from there, if the influencer accepts the assignment, they are, the marketer's message with the acceptance, and the influencer is given, in a way, a creative brief about, these are the things that I would like you to do for my brand, as whether it's a blog post, whether it's a social share, to give them some background as to what they're trying to achieve. So then the influencer can take that content and create the right content that would resonate with their audience. Now, the value exchange is very important. And that if it's there, there's the influencer is going to create content that is meaningful, that is authentic with their audience. And what we found out is that brands and marketers are often too controlling over that, where they want the influencer to follow their brand guidelines, of course, right, and all the different legal criteria. But unfortunately, what happens is that it somewhat removes the authenticity in the way that the influencer can create the content, and it just becomes another advertising campaign. And the challenge there, or the problem, I should say, is that advertising doesn't really work, and that people see it as an ad, that hence the increase in ad blocking technology. I think there's a recent report released where ad blocking is especially prevalent on mobile devices, where I think it's reached 420 million people worldwide, and I think on desktop 220 million. So I guess long story short is that if you're going to dictate the content that you want influencers to create, it just looks like another ad, and there's no point in doing it. So it's obviously very important to ensure there's the right value exchange between the brand and between the influencer, and giving them some creative freedom and flexibility to ensure that when they do something for you, that it does come off as authentic and resonate. So there are a bunch of different, nuances that go into building the relationship and facilitating the relationship. It's somewhat automated within our platform. If you were to go through it in a manual process without a technology, it can become quite laborious, and then you get into the trap of what I kind of explained there, in that the content gets lost and the authenticity gets lost because there are no checks and balances to mitigate that.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. I mean, the fact that it's because people can tell if something is an ad, and that they're being marketed to, as opposed to the direction that a lot of content is going anyway, which explains why these influencers are influencers, right? The content itself is very transparent. It's authentic. It's about relationships. And so that's a really good point you made there, that it can't be something that's forced per se, like a straight up ad.
Exactly.
Gotcha. Now, are there specific industries that tend to benefit more from influencer marketing, others that you've seen? And and within those industries, are there indicators that would alert them that, hey, if you want to boost, following, or their goals, period, they want to see a boost. Are there indicators to let them know that you should look towards, an influencer coming on board? Are there any signs that they would be aware of, or that they should look out for that show that they're ready for that type of step, if that makes sense?
Yeah, I think so. So indicators in terms of forecasting the success of an influencer marketing campaign. So I think it's twofold in that marketers will look for certain aspects of engagement and KPIs, and the same thing with influencers. And within our platform, we have different metrics that we help marketers and influencers measure to understand the effectiveness and understanding where there is opportunity for them to improve the campaign or the content of that campaign. So from, I think the best metric really is cost per engagement. And that is important in that not all influencers equal. You might have a huge following, but what we've found out is that sometimes when you have a larger following, there is a lower level of engagement. And it's really about engagement of content that makes it valuable, right? So, like, for example, if I had 10 million followers and only, 0.5% will engage with the content, it isn't necessarily that effective. I mean, with the sheer size of it, yes, but it's not necessarily effective in the way of, the level of engagement that you should expect. So the measure there for both marketers and influencers is to understand the level of engagement, how many likes, how many shares, how many comments, how many actions a consumer or their audience is having with a particular piece of content created through the influencer for that specific brand. And for the brand, the thing is that they want to measure that cost per engagement. And so the more engagement they get, and if it's optimized correctly, lower the cost there, but you should also see a spike in the level of engagement. And that's important because what I shared earlier is that people often think of reach and the size of an influencer's following as being synonymous with success, but that isn't necessarily the case when you're trying to run an influencer marketing campaign. So that's probably the biggest metric to look at. There are other cues that you can look at in as far as tying the campaign code that you have, if it's all online, obviously, and understanding what the conversion is based on whether someone clicked, say, a call to action within a blog, and then if they convert on that call to action and sign up for an offer or purchase something based on that link. So that's another way to measure the effectiveness of it, is that the click through all the way to purchase.
Gotcha. Okay. And in terms, are there again specific industries that tend to benefit from this more than others?
Yeah, I definitely think so. So with TapInfluence, we have quite a breadth and depth of different types of customers, but the depth area in terms of where we're seeing a lot of traction specifically are the following verticals, and that's fashion and beauty, CPG, retail and grocery. And those are the areas that we've seen a lot of success in. Fashion and beauty naturally makes sense, in my opinion, in that you see a lot of influencers, YouTube stars, right, who might, show a video of them putting on makeup and, changing or transforming themselves and then showing the different products that they use. And so that works quite nicely in that there's the influencers offering value, they're actually showing something, there's utility there. And then it's something that the person who's watching the video can easily understand and make a purchase based on their recommendation. So that works really well there. And then the other is fashion. I've seen a lot of success there. At TapInfluence, we've got a client called Express, which is it's actually a men's and women's clothing fashion company. And so we used influencers to basically model different outfits based on the Express clothing line, and show it in context of their lifestyle, and people identify with that, and that they follow these different influencers for specific things, like, for example, skateboarding might be one of them. And so they saw the different clothes that they wore from Express that helped their audience contextualize how they could see themselves wearing that same clothing.
Okay, I see. That's so interesting. So, Joseph, this is all such interesting information. I'm taking notes because, again, this is an area that you see happen, but you don't really know all that's going on. It's great that you guys have a great product there to bridge that gap for a lot of different brands and influencers. So as we go ahead and wrap up, because I do want to be respectful of your time. For the people who are listening, what advice would you share with them, or tips, or maybe either how they can position themselves to get on board with this style of marketing if they haven't done before, or for those that just are looking to increase something about their marketing efforts, and to be more effective. I mean, we're going into 2017. Just what advice in general would you have for the listeners? So, we have a few resources on my company's website. So if you go to www.tapinfluence.com, in the top navigation, you should see a resources tab. And within there, probably my favorite resource is the Influencer Starter Kit. So it provides different worksheets to help you understand how to strategize your influencer marketing campaign through to executing it. And there are a bunch of different helpful worksheets in that to help you really understand the end-to-end of running a campaign. So that's probably a great resource. I think if you also search for what is influencer marketing, one of our blogs come up as the first organic post. So I know that's a pretty helpful resource as well. One thing that's super interesting, an advice that I would give is eMarketer recently released a report where it indicated that over 84% of marketers are going to run an influencer marketing campaign in the next 12 months.
So I think it's really about getting ahead of the game, so using those resources to help you understand how to execute it and do it well. And that's the trick, is doing influencer marketing well. So check out those resources. You don't want to, fall into some of these bad practices that you'll basically fall flat. Check out the resources. There's a ton there. I definitely recommend the Influencer Starter Kit as a great place to start.
Awesome. This is so valuable. Thanks for sharing that. I actually just pulled up the page myself. How can people find you if they have additional questions? We definitely have the resource page that we'll link up in the show notes there. But if people have specific questions and want to reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so obviously on LinkedIn, I'm Joseph Cole. You can also find me on Twitter. I'm at Joe F. Cole, so that's my Twitter handle, JOE, F as in Frank, COLE.
Awesome.
And so that's probably the easiest way to find me.
Great. Well, Joseph, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And this was just great information that you shared with us. I'm really excited about this interview. This is excellent. Thanks for being here.
Of course. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Well, you guys, that does it for this episode. Thank you guys for tuning in. Be sure to reach out to Joseph and follow him on all his social media. He's a wealth of knowledge and information for a number of different brands I know that are listening. So thanks again for tuning in, you guys. Until the next time, remember, a good boss is a good leader. Go out there, serve your gifts to the world, because you're the boss. Thanks, guys.
Thanks so much for listening to the Marketing Boss Podcast with your host, video marketing expert, Parshell Houghton. We'll catch you next time.